Medea, I was in a small group of 3 people, Nevada and me from Hawaii, and we were doing it in our section. And as soon as we did that, they would, what do they call it? The whips would have all the people around us go, USA, USA. And then we'd stop and wait, and then we'd do it again. No more. I was just going to say, but it was really scary. I couldn't tell if I was in the Republican convention or the Democratic convention, except they went on and on about gay rights, and then, okay, must be in the Democrat. But that whole nationalism was very Republican. So what are your comments?
Well, my comments is that it was really incredible. There was a Clinton mole within the Bernie group delegation that decided right beforehand that they were going to do the No More War. And the word got out then, when they do no more war, you yell USA. And it's just mind-boggling that no more war is a negative thing in the Democratic Party. It really is incredible. So, I mean, it shows you the work we have ahead of us.
Staggering.
Well, the new party we got to get.
Over here?
Yeah, it's true.
Question.
Thank you. Mary Hanson Harrison. I'm the current president of the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And I want to give a shout out to one of our Wilfers, who is Mark's mother. Mark, Paul, and Francis are the product of a peaceful movement for all of us in the world. And I am giving the uprising to all of my board, or our board, I should say. And I would like you, Mark, to give us that ending, that conclusion, that pathway, because that's just a little bit, that we can follow in a very pragmatic way, because you give the history and understanding of both Alinsky and Piven and show how that our structure and our Big Bang movements can work together to make a long-term change.
All right. Okay.
Great. So, yeah, thank you. I mean, Wilf is an inspiration. If you guys can hear me, Wilf is an inspiration to me, and my mother's been involved, and she's been obviously a great guide in our lives. I mean, I guess, I think that one thing that was very encouraging to me about this panel is we went from the theoretical to the sort of specific, and we got a lot of really concrete suggestions of ways that people can get involved. So that's an awesome thing. On that theoretical level, there's been a body of knowledge that's developed over the last 30 years about how nonviolence can be very proactively applied. This is a field known as civil resistance. And a lot of that dialogue has actually focused on challenging undemocratic regimes, taking lessons from struggles in the Philippines or South Africa or Serbia, any number of places. And so one thing that we've been very interested in is how do we take some of these insights back and apply it to a situation where, we do have certain democratic structures, but of course those are compromised in all sorts of different ways. In an election year like this, we're told that it's all about electing the right people, or, the focus is entirely on lobbying in the electoral system. And so I think it's really important for us to recognize the power that we have that goes beyond that makes democracy not just a once in every 4-year type of exercise, but an ongoing one. And that also involves protests and movements that are disruptive. Some of the great transformative changes in the last century have come from times when people don't obey and people refuse to obey on a wide scale. And I think we have some great examples of that here today, and that's something I would definitely encourage everyone to be a part of.
Thank you. I see in the green sweater, did you have your hand up?
Colleen from Minnesota, previously from Iowa. Great presentation exposing Saudi Arabia. You might also want to mention that Obama vetoed the 9/11 families from even being allowed to sue and find out the truth about 9/11 just a day ago. And then also, I heard that somehow the United States and maybe others manipulated Saudi Arabia to be head of the Human Rights Committee in the United Nations.
I think we have the gentleman in the back over here.
Can
and
I
then
just
we'll
comment
go
on
back
that?
over here.
First of
in
all,
back.
the issue of that Obama just vetoed, it's called the JASTA bill. It gives the right of 9/11 families to sue Saudi Arabia in U.S. courts. He vetoed it, saying that this would make U.S. people vulnerable to being sued for their war crimes. We would, something many of us think would be a good thing. But Congress this week is going to decide whether to override the veto. It could be the first time a veto has ever been overridden in Obama's 8 years. So this next week is going to be very, very important. And the other thing you said, they're not the head of the Human Rights Council. They're head of a particular panel on the Human Rights Council, but it's disgusting that they are on the Human Rights Council. And it was a deal made, and they are going up for renewal. They want to stay on the Human Rights Council. So that's another campaign we can have, is to get our allies overseas and to push our ambassador to say no to Saudi Arabia being on the Human Rights Council.
Bill Dyson, I want to commend all of you for your comments today, especially the ABSPAB. I've seen it 1,000 times in school, and it's used just as you described, and a way to suck young people in. But I wanted to focus on something else. I had decided I'd talk to my class this week, and I decided I'd put a question to them. What do you guys feel about what's taken place in the last week or so? So one kid said, well, what are you talking about? The stuff, you talking about the shootings? I said, yeah. Now tell me what you think. And they proceeded to talk. On and on and on. They proceeded to talk. The ultimate thing that came out of it that astounded me was that each one had something similar to say about what they thought was taking place. One was complacency on their part, and that we don't know what to do. Let me tell you what the class looked like. A different mixture than the crowd is here. I mean, it was a mixed crowd, you know, and there they are. People who have some compassion, feel strongly about, but complacency and not knowing what to do. And you know, you got to know where I'm headed here with this. Yeah, I got a question here. And I don't know if I should drop it on this group here. But what do we do about that very issue that those kids are complacent about, not knowing what to do, and where we are today? I mean, is it a separate thing? Or is it to be included? How do we do it? How do we draw the young people in? What do we do with that? Or is this something to be gone off that direction, and the issues that matter to them that they're involved in each day, that they talk about, and gets nothing? Gets nothing. So the question becomes ultimately, what do we do here? They may not know what to do because we may not know what to do.
Thank you. Would the panelists like to discuss that at all? No?
I think we're staring in the face of 2 generations of the corporatization and militarization of our schools. And, you know, when Gar Alperovitz spoke yesterday, I wanted to get the opportunity to ask him, you know, you've been dealing with undergraduates that arrive here or at Maryland, and you have for 40 years. What's changed in their mindset? I think a lot has changed. We need to get into the schools, and we need to change the dialogue. We need to change the mindset. And it's something all of us can do. It really is. These are our schools. We need to make some calls. We need to find out what the heck they're teaching our kids. We need to download the curriculum. And if you see some wild stuff in the curriculum, school board meetings usually have a 5-minute public comment part. And you say, hey, I noticed, you have this J. Rotzi textbook, you have this regular textbook. Both of them are off the mark. What are you doing? This one's way off the mark. So, it's a matter of taking ownership of your schools, man. We're dealing with the future here. It's all about the mind of the 11 and 12 and 13-year-olds first.
Thank you.
I would also not be so negative, because there are so many young people that are involved in movements right now. And if you look at all the response to the shooting in Charlotte, there are solidarity actions all over the country, mostly organized by young people. And if you look at the environmental movement and all the people who've gone to North Dakota to stand with the indigenous community, there are a lot of them are young people. And if you look at the immigration rights movement, you'll see a lot of young folks. We have to do a better job in this movement, but there are a lot of young people engaged in activism.
Oh, great. We had a question.
Medea, I want to thank you for going to the Democratic Convention this year. I went to the one in '68. The basic difference is we got beat up outside, you got beat up inside. So my question is, how do we pick up on this huge movement? Your history of the rise of these various movements is beautiful and it's very unknown. And we have just had, for what it was worth, a socialist, a self-proclaimed socialist, get more votes than anyone else in American history, including Eugene V. Debs, although Debs was a real socialist. Bernie also did not make much of the war issue. But we're about to have an election, and it's going to be over. That's one thing we're certain of. How do we, as a peace movement and involved in so many other issues, pick up and not let the energy die this time, but pick up the millions of people who went out and voted and worked for Bernie and turn it into a post-election, long-term, coherent, coalition-based movement? How do we do that?
Well, I mean, this is the $1 million question, and it's not something that we can, answer in a 30-second soundbite. But I mean, what's interesting to me about the Bernie Sanders campaign is it didn't really do. It used the momentum and the energy of an electoral campaign to do something that no one thought was at all possible, right? It's not like they built a party up, by electing mayors and school board members and so forth, and finally got to the point where we can, run a socialist candidate. Instead, it went the opposite way. And in that way, it actually had less in common than, some of the traditional types of organizing, and more in common with a mass movement. So Bernie Sanders, I think, like something like the Jesse Jackson campaign, is an example of using movement energy to run a campaign. And I think you're right, that activated millions of people. Now, the difficult question, the historically difficult question, is how do we absorb that? How do we institutionalize? How do we carry on when that galvanizing focus of the election, in this case an electoral primary, is gone? I don't think that there's a single answer to that. So I think it's more an open question that we need to be talking about together. And do you guys want to add something?
Well, I think the idea that Bernie Sanders and his group were going to start something called Our Revolution, did anybody part of the House parties that did that? I think that was a problematic beginning. And one, there was all kinds of staff turmoil. Two, it really wasn't anything new and exciting. It would support other electoral campaigns. The movement outside of the Democratic Party doesn't have access to the database of all these people, so there's no way to physically kind of try to capture them online. And I think because of that disappointing start, a lot of people have already kind of filtered out of that movement. But let's remember, whether it was the Seattle or the Occupy movement or this, a lot of people get energized by it, and then they find other movements that they want to be part of. So there will be lots of positive and new folks involved in lots of different issues.
Great, thank you. Unfortunately, we're out of time now, so thank you again to our speakers and for all the questions.